Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Good morning to everyone. And everyone that's on the line. I pray that everybody's Thanksgiving they had a wonderful time. Let's jump right into our lesson. Wonderful lesson this morning. Our lesson today is a noble family tree. Our background passage is Ruth, chapter 1, verses 1 through background passage is Ruth chapter 1 through chapter 4, and Luke chapter 3, verses 23 through 38. Our lesson passage is Ruth chapter 4, verses 9 through 17, and Luke chapter 3, verse 23, and verse 31 and 32. Our unifying topic this morning is the ancestry of King David. Our lesson text, and we have three, and Boaz's decision is witnessed, and that's Ruth chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. Our second lesson text is Boaz marries Ruth. That's Ruth chapter 4, verses 13 and 15. And our third lesson text is Boaz and the Messiah lineage. Ruth chapter 4, verses 16 through 17. And Luke chapter 3, verses 23 and verse 31 and 32. Our main thought this morning. The woman gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. And that's Ruth chapter 4, verses 17. A unifying principle this morning is people belong to families extended across generations. What can we learn about ourselves by knowing our ancestry family? Jesus and King David family tree featured an unlikely marriage between Boaz and Ruth, a testimony to the breadth of God's grace to effect divine purpose. A little bit of background. And I'm going to read the first 4 verses of Ruth chapter 1 to give us a feel of what's going on in our lesson today, a noble family tree. Verse 1, chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled, and there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man, verse 2, was Abimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons was Mahlon and Chilion. They were from Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab and continued there. Verse 3, and Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons, and they took them wives in the woman of Moab. The name of the one was Oprah, and the name of the other Ruth, and they dwelled there about 10 years. So you guys kind of recall in our previous lessons in Ruth that there was a famine, and Elimelech and Naomi took matters in their own hand, and they moved out of Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab. You got to trust God when you're going through stuff, and at that point, they got ahead of God. But anyway, they went, and when they got there to Moab, they stayed about 10 years, and then Elimelech died, and then the 2 sons died. So Ruth was stuck with her daughter-in-laws, and times were hard there as well, but they heard that everything had changed in Bethlehem. So they decided, well, Naomi decided that you guys could stay here. I'm going to go on back to my homeland. And Oprah, she stayed, but Ruth decided she was going to go with Naomi back to her homeland and her people. And that was pleasing to God. And Ruth was really, she loved Naomi. And again, her people, she was willing to accept the religion and everything. She would leave it all, and I'm going to go back. And by Ruth marrying Mahlon, she automatically became, I guess my point is, God can use anybody. And Gentile, she was considered Gentile, Ruth, and she married a Hebrew, so that makes her Hebrew. And so there's no, you got to be a Jew or a Hebrew to be a Christian. It could be anybody. That was a good point there. Again, verse 5, and Mahlon and Chilion died, also both of them, and the woman was left with her 2 sons. And of course, that leads up to the event of today in lesson, a noble family tree. So we don't know who the author is, and our main characters in the lesson today is Naomi, Ruth, Boaz, and God. And again, she was a Moabite woman, and it's how things happened that she ended up in King David lineage. And again, that's how God can use anybody. Elimelech, when he moved out and went to a foreign land, he got ahead of God, and so God got to kind of clean up this mess that he made. And he's going to use Boaz and Ruth and Naomi, which was, she felt like God had done her bitter by the death of her husband and then the death of her 2 sons. And now she's coming back. She has nothing. And Boaz is going to step in and do like Christ did us. He's going to be her redeemer, her kinsman redeemer. So this is the season, our lesson, this is the season of Advent where the next 4 Sundays is building up to the birth of Christ. And it also, we're going to emphasize a theme of joy, love, hope, and peace. And we do that, during this season by Christmas trees and lights and, that type thing. And it's just a celebration that, for the birth of Christ. And that's what it's all about. So we're going to jump right into our lesson and see how Boaz's decision is witnessed. Before we start in verse 9, I want to go to the first 8 verses of chapter 4. We'll read right through it, and then we can kind of go into verse 9 at that point. Chapter 4, verse 1. And the words of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out against the Philistines. Excuse me, that is not Ruth chapter 4. Where my class at this morning? All right, Boaz and Ruth marries. Thank you. Okay. Then went Boaz up to the gates and set him down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho, such a one, turn aside and sit down here. And he turned aside and sit down. Okay, so looking at the beginning here in chapter 4, Boaz wants Ruth's hand in marriage, and he's also wanting to save Naomi's land and property. He wants her to be able to obtain that. So he goes up to the gate, and looking at the first 8 verses, it looks like the person that he talked to was either a brother or a near closer relative than he was, a cousin or what have you. It don't really say. So in Jimmy's case, use your imagination. But he goes up. This person that he talks to is a closer relative than he is. And back in those days, if a brother's wife died, then he could marry that widow. And then that way they keep their namesake, their lineage, and their property lives on. So Boaz wanted to do that in Naomi's case, but he had to take it to the gates. And at the gates, you had your elders, your priests, and all that administrative stuff was handled there. That business was handled there. And reading, you needed 10 people, so he called the elders in to do the administrative part, which deal with properties and stuff like that. But if it was a judicial case or problem, then it needed at least 2 to 3 witnesses to do those. So he got the 10 people, and the person that he's referenced to here, he gives him that opportunity to buy the land from Naomi and to restore the namesake. But Boaz kind of used Jedi mind trick on him and said, oh, well, if you do that, then you're going to have to take Mahlon's wife, Ruth. And the young man that was contemplating purchasing the property, he decided that he didn't want Ruth, and that would mess up his lineage. So he didn't want to add that extra thing to his portfolio, and so he decided he'd just step back and let Boaz proceed to purchase the property. And he did that, and then once he took off his shoe, then that sealed the deal, and that was an indication that that person would not step foot on the land and try to claim it or anything like that. And it was all witnessed right there at the gate by the 10 people. Go ahead, Jesse.
And Ruth was elderly. Naomi was an elderly woman at that time.
Okay.
So this young man wouldn't take an elderly woman, he got to get his lineage going.
Right.
And at that time, they didn't want Naomi.
Yeah, he didn't want to take that responsibility on, so he backed out, which was perfect. Boaz was in the right position that he wanted to be in, and so he stepped up to the plate, and he became their kinsman redeemer. And just like Christ became our redeemer, so it kind of mirrors what's going on today, and it's kind of what was happening back then. In verse 9, and Boaz, this is our first outline. And Boaz said unto the elders, people at the gate, and unto all the people, ye are witnesses this day that I have brought all that I was Elimelech, and all that was Chilion and Mahlon of the hands of Naomi. So he's indicating there at the gates to all the elders and all the witnesses that it all belongs to him at this point. He would be their redeemer, a kinsman redeemer. And verse 10, moreover, Ruth, the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among the brethren, and from the gates of this place ye are witness this day. So Boaz is kind of sealing the deal. Now, Boaz was, he had a few dollars. He was kind of wealthy, considered wealthy during that time. And he had fields and all that. And in the previous chapters, when Naomi returned back home, they went and Boaz had left some extra provisions in the field for Naomi and Ruth. And that's just an indication on how God will provide for us if we just trust him. And Boaz, he took care of them when they returned. And of course, Naomi was bitter. She had lost her husband and her sons, and but God was still providing for her, because when they left and went to the foreign land, that was their plan. That wasn't God's plan. And then when they heard that everything was okay and the famine was over, she returned, but she returned without her husband and her sons. So Jesus came from that line, and that's what the lessons is all about. Because again, the season of Advent, so we're building up to the birth of Christ. And anybody want to add anything? No. So in verse 11, all the people that were in the gates and the elders said, "We are witness." So they're the witness. "And the Lord makes the woman that is come unto thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephrathah, and be famous in Bethlehem." So in verse 11, again, the witnesses, they all witness it, and the woman come in their house. So they refer to this event, Rachel and Leah, which two did bid. So actually, these two ladies are, they started the 12 tribes. They're mothers of 12 tribes. So it's the thing that's going on here at the gate with Boaz stepping up and being their redeemer is pleasing to God. And everybody is reflecting on how Leah and Rachel, and they just kind of using those events that happened prior for this moment. And they start, the 12 tribes came from them, and this is pleasing to God. This whole thing is pleasing to God, because Boaz is doing the same thing that Christ is going to do. And then Christ has got to come from that line, King David's line. So we got God, they left, came back. So God got to make some adjustment. It's amazing how God would take our mess sometimes and turn it into a miracle. And so, yeah, he is punished. He's just. But as long as we stay, with him, trusting in him, he will see us through. So it don't matter. And Naomi came back with nothing, and look how he was providing for her. She was bitter, and people talking around the town and everything. And eventually, here in the lesson, the ladies is all going to get together. They're happy for her, in verse 12, "And let thy house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bare unto Judith, of the seeds from which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman." So another example was Tamar and Perez. So the seed that they're talking about is Jesus. So, God is aligning things up, and they are wishing nothing but the best for Boaz, Ruth, and Naomi, because she's still going to play a big part in this line of Christ, in this line, son of David. Questions on that first outline? Okay, Boaz marries Ruth. All right. Verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. All right, so far, everything that's happened at the gate, and by Boaz stepping up and being their kinsman redeemer, it's pleasing to God. So they're married, and they conceived a child, and they named him Obed. And that's a wonderful thing when you got a marriage that's sanctioned by God. Oh, you doing okay. Sometimes they just do it just to be doing it. People, they do their thing. But this marriage here was sanctioned by God. And, you think back that line, and Matthew's talked about the line of Jesus. And, of course, Luke talked about the line of Jesus. And we're going to talk a little bit about Luke. But they had different, they went at different ways. Matthew's went as far back as Adam and Eve, but Luke went as far back as Abraham, excuse me. And so they kind of take different directions. Matthew's focused more on Joseph and trying to, the thing I looked at with it was, we are human, and we got our own rules. So God's going to do whatever he needs to do to make things the way he wants them to be made. And for us, we see it a different way, with Joseph and in the line and all that. But that's okay. That's okay. That's okay with God, because he's going to make it his way anyway. That's just our little rules, little government rules of trying to track things down. But it's all designed in God's way, is the way I looked at it. So, Joseph was in there, but he really wasn't Jesus' father, but that's how he's just in there. And then they tried to tie all of it together, and God has another plan. And so he used a Gentile and a Hebrew to have it, to make his plan. Verse 14, and the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, for which has not left thee this day without a kinsman redeemer, the Boaz, that his name may be famous in Israel. So Ruth conceives, they have a son, and Naomi is blessed. Her bitterness now is going to turn to joy. She has a grandson, but Naomi treats Obed just like her own son. And she was so happy that in verse 15, and he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age, for the daughter-in-law which loved thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, has been born him. So she is overjoyed. Naomi is to have this grandson, and she treated him just like a son. She ended up raising him, doing all she could to help out, and she held that grandson close to her bosom. So it was like 7 sons was a traditional way back then of a perfect family, and that one child in Naomi's life was like the perfect family. And so Obed became her redeemer, you know, and God, and then her bitterness was gone. Everybody in the community was happy for her. And they actually helped her name Obed. So God is good, and you see, you know, like I said, He can take our mess, and it was a mess when they left and went to the foreign land, and just turn it into a miracle. Turn it into a miracle. And any comments at this point? Anybody?
I take it that Obed was born to
Ruth and Boaz.
Ruth and Boaz. In order for him to be in the lineage line, that's why Naomi took the child. So Ruth wasn't a Israelite, right?
Ruth was a Moab, yeah, from Moab.
Yeah. So, and Naomi, for her to have children, that was the only way she could have a child. Through Ruth.
Right.
Okay.
She gave him to him, and she raised him, along with the other women in the community. It's just, and the joy that she had, you know, verse 15 was like 7 sons, the perfect family, and she only had 1. But that line is the key. Christ is going to be in that line. King David's going to be in that line. You know, and that's what God done. He took and made her situation into a miracle. He turned it right into a miracle. And, you know, being a redeemer in the book mentioned, you know, we got different laws, you know, where things is provided for us, like Social Security, retirements, you know, disabilities and stuff like that. But that was both, for us, we have those things to, so we can, you know, make do and have provisions. But they didn't have nothing like that during that time. Naomi and Ruth, and they came back. Everything was you know, she had the land, but
Ruth had the love for Naomi.
she did.
That was the main thing.
She did. You know, when they came back and they had the land, by Boaz buying it and redeeming it for her, it gave her money and stuff so that she could provide for herself.
So Ruth said, where you go,
I go. Your people is
my people. Your God is my
God. There you go. There you go. And that was Ruth. Now Orpah, she decided she'll just stay. She's not, you know, she's not going. She's gonna stay in her homeland. But Ruth, she played a key part in that King David's line, and Jesus. All right, our last lesson text is Boaz and the Messiah's lineage. In verse 16, and Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became nurse unto it. So she loved Obed like her own, and she raised him. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse and the father of David. So, and like I said, we're in that Advent season, and the lessons is going to be building up to the birth of Christ. So we're in that line. Go ahead.
Okay, you know, it says they went back to Bethlehem. Think about that. Ruth, who has no family in Bethlehem, she goes back with Naomi to Bethlehem with nothing except a hope.
Right.
And loyalty to someone else. So who else went to Bethlehem? You know, I mean, it's just a full circle.
Yeah.
You know, it started in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And it continued to start in Bethlehem. And it's one of those full circle moments when you go, oh yeah, God really was in this mess.
You know, thank you, Linda. Bethlehem is fruitful, and to return there, I mean, even when Naomi was not feeling her best because things are not going her way, it seemed like Ruth always had her back and was that encouragement to Naomi. And Ruth just, she was a blessing. She was a blessing to Naomi. And you know, like you said, to return back, just risked it all, and she had to be, you know, God-filled, and leave her homeland to come back with her mother-in-law.
How many would do that today? How many women would do that today?
I know. Yeah.
Go somewhere where you don't. You're just with your mother-in-law.
Yeah. But if God's in it, you know, it will work out. And He was in it. He sanctioned it. He blessed this. He blessed this marriage of Boaz and Ruth. It was pleasing to him. And for us, you know, we run through different situations and different circumstances. You know, we just got to keep that positive outlook, and don't try to make too much of it, you know, because God gonna work it out. And if it's prayed on and the right thing to do, it'll work out in your favor every time. Yeah. And sometimes it takes a while. Our time ain't God's time. You know, we want it now, but that ain't how it works. You just keep the faith, trust, obey. And you know, Naomi, she got down and out about a lot of things. And I mean, her husband, her boys, foreign land, going back home, she didn't know what to expect. So, and then Obed he is the father of Jesse, and then Jesse is King David's father. So Jesus comes in that line. And, it's, we, in the Advent season, where we have the theme of hope and love and kindness and peace and joy. And that's what it's all about, birth of Christ. I think next week's lesson, they're going to continue. They're going to give different events leading up to Jesus' birth. So then our lesson, Boaz and the Messiah lineage, goes to Luke chapter 3, verses 23. And it reads, and Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, which was the son of Hela. Now, if you guys recall, I mentioned that sometimes we get into this rule that it's God has to kind of bring himself down to our level because we'll never be at his. But 30 years was a rule that they had during that time, where most priests would start preaching and all. So 30 was that time. And in this case, God's like, well, we'll do what the humans do. And so 30 years was kind of the norm for to become a priest. So Joseph, as was supposed to. So Luke is telling his part of the lineage, and he's got Joseph in it. Of course, we know Joseph was not Jesus' father, but that's okay. He still is in that lineage. And that's what Luke is saying. And then, of course, in Matthew's, he goes a little bit farther. He goes back to Adam and Eve. But in Luke chapter 3, verses 31, which was the son of Maliah, which was the son of Manan, which was the son of. So Luke is telling his part of the lineage to Christ and King David. That's basically what he's doing. They kind of took different routes, but they get back to the same point. And when it comes to Joseph, it's not for us to try to figure that out, because it's way above our pay grade, I guess they used to say in the Army. And God was in control of it all. So he's in there, but God was arranging things for him. Yes. Yes.
The way that Naomi adopted Obed.
All right.
Joseph adopted Jesus, for lack of a better term.
Right.
The way that Naomi adopted Obed. Obed wasn't her son, but yet she took him as her own.
Right.
Jesus was not Joseph's son, but he took him as his own. And because Joseph was in prayer for a son.
All right. Lily, you always do your homework. That's a good point. That's a good point. And it's good to mirror our lessons with points, because the Old Testament King James Version is hard to kind of pick that bone clean, Jimmy. Yeah. So I mean, every little bit helps, and that's a good point.
Nobody's saying a word.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Missed the point.
Yeah.
It's a good lesson on immigration.
All right.
Keep in mind the Bible is just as current as your 6 o'clock news. And so Ruth was an immigrant, but God used her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we can't frown
drum, that stool, that organ, to make his point. Ruth was an immigrant. Look at what's happening in our society right now.
All right. And verse 32, it continues on in Luke, and he's still going over the lineage, King David, Messiah, which was the son of Jesse, which was the son of Obed, which was the son of Boaz, which was the son of Salmon, which was the son of Nason. So it kind of highlights, that the Messiah is coming from that lineage, that line. Real good lesson. Read it all. Conclusion. Ruth's story is a remarkable account that affirms hopes in the Lord and highlights that God moves on our behalf for our good and for his glory. Through Ruth, we know God can redeem our most difficult situation and bless us in a way that we could not imagine. Who could know that Naomi would be the recipient of such blessings, having returned to her native Bethlehem with no husband, no son, and the vow of her Moabite daughter-in-law? Who could imagine that from that union of Ruth and Boaz would come the greatest king in Israel history, and later the King of Kings? The story of redemption. Boaz, having stepped up as the kinsman redeemer, is a foreshadowing of what Jesus would have gloriously come to do as he stepped up to redeem humanity's hopeless condition. Redeem us. So, thank you.
One thing, Jose, on the back of this lesson, it says, consider listening to Bishop Hezekiah Walker. I need you, or the harmony. Blessed be the ties that bind. Meditate on these words and reflect on the profound gift of the family, both biological and spiritual. Thank God and giving you family, and ask him how to show you to love in even more as serious way to your family.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. You piqued my interest right there. In today's world, and this is from experience, when Boaz went to his kin folks, to the gate, his brother or whoever, for family, right now today, we got to do better whenever we go to deal with one another, brothers and sisters, after the death of our parents and stuff like that. We got to do better. And this here lesson will help those families get through that kind of stuff. I've seen more times where brothers and sisters can't get along because they can't divide the properties and all that kind of,
A little piece of dirt.
Yeah.
Close up there.
Right. So,
Jealousy and envy stops them from communicating.
right. So, Christians, don't, get along. I'll leave that right there.